Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first Equal Pay Day virtual rally. I hope that's given us a little bit of energy to start the day. You can't have a rally without some music. So welcome from right across the country. We have 500 people, over 500 people joining us today, literally from coast to coast to coast. And we will have speakers as well from coast to coast to coast. As you know, we're all here to mark Equal Pay Day, to continue the fight for women's economic justice. And it's fantastic to see the numbers of you who are joining. We normally do this in person, and we normally have actions in our communities right across the country and on social media. But in this very exceptional year, it's fantastic that we can all join together virtually through this technology. So thank you for joining us on this Saturday. Bienvenue à tous nos amis francophones. I offer my apologies that we are conducting the rally in English. We only have one sound channel on this platform, so we're unable to do simultaneous interpretation. So my apologies. It's the best we were able to pull together on short notice, but we are, for our future events, looking at getting transcript, translation and interpretation that we can type into the chat boxes. So we will be able to accommodate more in the future. But welcome today, and let's begin. I want to introduce myself. I should have said that right off the top. I'm Faye Faraday. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Equal Pay Coalition. And Karen, if you can show us who is, if you can get Jan and I on the screen, that would be great.
Faye,
sure,
hi.
Yeah.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name's Jan Borowy. I'm the co-chair of the Equal Pay Coalition with Faye Faraday here in Ontario. And as we open today's Equal Pay Day, our first virtual rally, we wanted to start with a land acknowledgement. So I want to start by saying I'm second generation. I'm a white settler of Polish descent. And Faye?
And my family is Indigenous to the Philippines, but I am a first-generation settler here in Canada.
So we wanted to begin by saying we're holding this virtual rally on Turtle Island. We honor the First Peoples who've lived on Turtle Island since time immemorial. Settlers today and before us have failed to respect and acknowledge Indigenous peoples. They failed to respect Indigenous practices and ways of knowing. Settlers approached their relationship with First Peoples as one of genocide. And settlers today continued by failing to abide with signed treaties and agreements with First Peoples. So as one small act towards reconciliation, today we acknowledge the land that we're meeting on, as this is the traditional territory of many, many First Nations. From where Faye and I sit in Toronto, this includes the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And this entire area is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Agreement and the Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Acknowledging by acknowledging whose land we are on, we also acknowledge that we're all treaty people and that Indigenous laws are part of the laws that bind each and every one of us. So we ask all participants in this rally to please reflect for a moment, think about the land that we are all inhabiting and the steps each one of us can take to decolonize the spaces we are in. So today, on Equal Pay Day in particular, we acknowledge that Indigenous women have been harmed most profoundly by colonialism. Systemic discrimination and colonialism mean that Indigenous women across Turtle Island only earn 45% of what men on average earn each year. That's unacceptable. We acknowledge our duties to advance the calls for justice made by the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and together we can decolonize the spaces that we're in. Thank you.
So what we're going to do now is we'd like to, we've told you a bit about who we are, but we would like to get a sense of who you are. There are so many, hundreds of you on the rally today. And so we have a couple of questions that we want to ask you. Karen, if you can start our first poll. So we've got a poll up on the screen that that we ask you to respond to. And while you're doing that, we'll get some music.
Click to choose this one.
All right, folks, it looks like about 90% of you have voted, so I'm going to close the poll and share the results.
Oh. So thanks very much, Karen. We should have introduced Karen at the top of this as well. Our apologies. Karen Campbell is from the Canadian Women's Foundation. She's an expert in helping us organize these webinars, so we want to thank Karen very much. Karen will be helping us with the polling throughout this rally today. So this is actually really interesting overview. We've got lots from Ontario, folks from the prairies, BC, and the North, Quebec, and Maritimes. We should add that we've had to cluster the country into just 5 different groups because that's all that the poll allows, is space for 5 answers. But we're thrilled to see that we've got folks attending this rally from across the country. So thank you, everyone. Now, Karen, let's put up the next poll, which is also a question of who's in the house, who's at the rally. And that's a question of which movements are you joining from? Please select one, and we'll just give you a few minutes to add your answer in.
All right, folks, so 90% have participated, so I'm going to close the poll, and here are your results.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Karen. So welcome to everyone from such a diverse group of movements, representatives from various Indigenous communities, large representation from folks who are affiliated with trade unions, community organizations, and other social movements. Including climate justice, and we know the migrant workers are a part of this as well. And then for many individuals who've joined, welcome to the rally. This is thrilling. We're happy to see everybody here. So Faye, why don't I turn it over to you now and to talk a bit about Equal Pay Day.
Sure, absolutely. So we've just had a chance to have a look at who's on the line with us fighting for to close the gender pay gap. But why don't we bring some of those facts to the forefront here? It's important to know that we are not starting from a position of equality. However much there may be a will to deny this or to turn away from the reality of how systemic discrimination operates in our communities, the reality is that women are significantly impoverished in our communities, and that happens right across the board in every industry, in every sector of the economy, at every level of education, at every age group. The most recent census data showed that the gender pay gap is not shared equally amongst all of us. Women with disabilities face the largest gender pay gap in Canada. They earn only, they have a gender pay gap of 56%, which means that they earn only 44 cents on the dollar of what men earn on average in a year. Immigrant women have a 55% gender pay gap, which means that they earn only 45 cents on the dollar. Indigenous women, as I said at the top, they face a 45% gender pay gap, which means that they're earning 55 cents on the dollar. Racialized women face a 40% pay gap, so they're earning 60 cents on the dollar. And on average, women right across Canada face a 32% gender pay gap. And what is appalling is that number has hardly shifted in the last 2 decades. It's entrenched, and it's something that we need to have very conscious, intentional action to uproot. When people ask about why we celebrate Equal Pay Day in April, and it's because with a 32% on average gender pay gap, it takes women 15.5 months to earn what men do in 12 months. So you can see that that means that it's working all the way through 2019 and into April of 2020 in order to earn what men on average earned in 2019. Another point of the year that we mark this is in September, which shows the part of the year that you're working for free, essentially. If you have a 32% gender pay gap, you are essentially working for free from the middle of September onwards. What that means for women working a 45-year adult career is that's the equivalent of working 13 years with no pay at all. The gender pay gap desperately impoverishes women during their working lives and into retirement, and it does affect all communities right across the country. This year, before COVID, we decided that we were going to mark Equal Pay Day on a Saturday because most women work in jobs that are not Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And by drawing attention to that work on a weekend, it was important for us to bring some more of the light of what the reality of women's work looks like. What has been interesting when the COVID pandemic has hit is that it's exactly those women who are not working 9 to 5 who are working on the front lines of COVID. So when we look at those female-dominated jobs, and we know that we have a labor market that is deeply segregated by gender, it is those female-dominated jobs that are in the very high-risk frontline positions of the pandemic. When we look at nurses, 92% are women. Medical lab technicians, 80% women. Respiratory therapists, 75% women. Personal support workers, all the people working in long-term care homes, 90% women. Childcare, 99% women. The community and social services who are supporting our broad communities and especially the most vulnerable in our communities, 75 to 80% women. Cashiers, 84% women. Food prep, 72%. Cleaners, 71% women. All of these women are risking their lives on the front lines in the fight against COVID right now. And we want to recognize them in particular on Equal Pay Day. Their work, which has been so deeply undervalued for decades, has come to the fore as absolutely essential. There's no way to deny the value of women's work. But women are on the front lines of COVID in another way. At the same time as women are working on the front lines, they are also at greatest risk of layoff during the pandemic. The predictions are that 13% of all women are at risk of layoff because of the sectors that they work in. Women are the vast majority of part-time workers. They are 70% of the part-time workers in our economy, and 25% of all part-time workers are expected to be laid off. And this is an issue of class. For the workers who are making $14 an hour or less, 42% of them are at immediate risk of layoff, and 32% of workers earning $14 to $16 an hour are also at immediate risk of layoff. Income inequality means that women are the workers who are more frequently at the bottom of the earning scales, so that is something that will hurt women, and in particular racialized women and women with disabilities disproportionately. On the flip side, workers who are making more than $40 an hour, only 1% of them are at risk of layoff, and that is a very gendered experience as well, as men are much more present among higher earners. Through the pandemic, we also know that women are facing increased risk of gender-based violence because the circumstances that lead to spikes in violence are intensified by the pandemic, the uncertainty, the unemployment, the financial stress, the fear. And our practices of self-isolation and physical distancing intensify those risks and impacts of gender-based violence. Already, we've seen across the world that the increase in gender-based violence has skyrocketed in the weeks and even in the days following restrictions under the pandemic. So this is the reality from which we are working when we look at what is happening and why it's important for us to mark Equal Pay Day every year, but especially this year when we look at the intensification of the harms that women are experiencing.
So
Again,
Faye,
yeah.
yes, so, you know, the inequality is unacceptable. We've been saying this. We've been saying the inequality is unacceptable for decades. We've said the systemic discrimination is unacceptable. And we have hundreds of women right now at a virtual rally together. So I think it's time we start making some noise, don't you? So what I'd ask everybody to do right now is two things. Number one is Karen is going to unmute everybody's mics.
She's unmuting everybody. What? She's unmuting everybody.
Oh. Unmuted. And then the next thing you need to do is make sure that your mic is unmuted. You'll see a green button on the right side of your screen. And the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is pick up your pots and pans and your noisemakers.
Long live socialism.
The idea is
Do you have a pen? I'm supposed to make noise. No, it's on you. Give me a pot. I can go up there. Don't do that.
very noisy.
I'm sorry, Kiki, but don't do stuff like that.
Socialists like that.
Don't do stuff like that, please.
Okay. Thanks very much. It's so great to hear all of that that fantastic noise. And I think with that, what we'd like to do is bring on our speakers. We have a wonderful lineup of speakers today, and first up is Marie Clarke Walker, who is the Secretary Treasurer of the Canadian Labour Congress. Marie, we're thrilled to have you here, and we welcome your comments.
All right, Marie, I have to interrupt because I think we can't hear you. I'm just unmuting you again. Can you try again? Okay, you're unmuted according to us, but we can't hear you. So I'm sorry, I'm not sure why. No, can't hear you.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Can hear
Yes,
you now.
we can.
Thank you.
Okay. The wonders of technology. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be with everyone, and thank you, Jen and Faye, for organizing this virtual rally. I think we need that camaraderie at this time. This year, it's important to know that Equal Pay Day takes place in an ever-changing world, one that you don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. You don't know what's going to happen to our economy, but more importantly, we don't know what's going to happen to ourselves, our family, our communities, with all of the current situation going on. It should never take more than 12 months for women, whether racialized, Indigenous, immigrant, or differently abled. It should never take more than a year for any woman to earn the same as a man when doing a job of equal value. The pandemic has not changed the narrative for many. In fact, what I think it's done is shone a light on the lack of concrete protections, and in some cases, basic protections provided to those who are providing the very services that we need to survive. We already heard Faye talk about some of those services, and these have always been contentious issues within those sectors, whether it's the care sector, public service sector, as well as those in retail and hospitality. And in this particular case, all cleaners in all sectors are also significantly, in fact, affected. It has shown everyone the importance of the jobs, and how these jobs have been traditionally undervalued and underpaid. These jobs that are casual, temporary, part-time, precarious in nature, jobs held by women for the most part. Many of these same workers have now been deemed essential, but are still underpaid and working in poor conditions with very little protections, and still have unpaid responsibilities once they arrive home. Many of them are still stressing, and this is the piece that people in the general public are not going to hear about. They're stressing because they don't fit any of the criteria. Although the government continues to make announcements as, financial assistance for everybody, there's still some that don't meet any of the criteria, or their employer views a recommendation that the government has put out there as just that, a recommendation. They're not concerned about whether or not somebody who's over 70, their life is at risk, or somebody with a disability is significantly impacted. And we're getting calls like this every single day. The crisis also highlights and exposes those who tend to fall through the cracks: seniors, people with disabilities, the poor, the marginalized, the invisible, the ones worried about using the few sick days that they currently have, those who have no sick days left, or those who never had sick days at all, the ones for whom English or French is not their first language, the ones dependent on their employer for their place to live, the ones for whom covering their faces was a crime until everyone had to cover up, the ones whose families are far away, the ones with no union or organization to speak for them. These workers, in spite of their working conditions, low pay, lack of proper leave provisions, put themselves on the line each and every day so that the rest of us can stay home to slow the spread. They should have the respect. They should have higher wages. They should have predictable hours, job security, paid sick days, emergency leave, support to meet their childcare needs, access to EI health benefits, and more importantly, access to all the necessary equipment that they're going to need to keep them safe, to keep us safe, and to do their job safely. It's interesting. Everybody's falling all over themselves to provide all of these things now, but these are things that we need all the time, particularly those that are in those those frontline jobs that are now being called essential. It shouldn't take a crisis to recognize the value of jobs that women do and respect them. It shouldn't take a crisis to recognize us and pay us what we're worth. It should never take more than a year for any woman to earn the same as a man when doing a job of equal value. We are done waiting. Pay discrimination needs to stop now, and we need to be valued. Thanks, everybody, and solidarity right across this country.
Thank you so much, Marie, for kicking us off and for bringing that important perspective on all the ways in which women are vulnerable and need the respect now and always, not just in a crisis. I'm thrilled at this point to invite our second speaker up, Patty Coates, who is the president of the Ontario Federation of Labour. Patty, who is the first woman to be the president of the Ontario Federation of Labour and who has been a long time supporter of the Equal Pay Coalition. Welcome, Patty.
Thank you very much, Faye. It is such a wonderful pleasure to be here with all of you at this Equal Pay Day digital rally. You know, folks, we are in unprecedented and difficult times with this pandemic crisis. But now more than ever, we must ensure women reach economic equality. And the data shows that when women work, our economy grows. During normal and even extraordinary times like the one we find ourselves in right now. Closing the gender wage gap is good for business. It's good for communities and families. If not closed, the wage gap continues over a woman's entire life. It keeps a woman behind in so many ways, in their ability to support their family, and their ability to provide the necessities. It impedes their ability to save money for extras or their retirement. It impedes their ability to leave an abusive situation or end the cycle of poverty. That is why pay equity advocates and labor push governments to bring in pay equity laws. For Ontario, the Pay Equity Act was introduced in 1987. And since then, the wage gap has been closed for thousands of women through the pay equity process. Yet, there are many, many more who have not seen the same economic justice. And I, for one, come from the education sector as an educational assistant, where it's a woman-dominated job class. And we have been trying to achieve pay equity since 2002. Yes, since 2002. And we've gone through the process with very little success. We even have a ruling from the Pay Equity Tribunal, yet our employer keeps fighting the ruling. The longer these women are denied what they are entitled to, the further behind they become. You may not be able to directly help these women as they fight to get what they may need or what they are owed, but there is something that we can do right now. You can light up Twitter with a timely tweet right now. Are you ready? If you have a pen, get it out, write this down. If you don't have a pen and you can't tweet this out, retweet somebody else's tweet of this. So this is what I want each of you to tweet. Without women's work, our communities won't function. Close the gender pay gap now. Equal pay for equal work. For those in Ontario, you can add @FordNation. The rest can just put women's work must be valued the same as men. Hashtag equal pay day. Hashtag power of many. Hashtag COVID-19. Now I'm going to repeat this one more time. Without women's work, our communities won't function. Close the gender pay gap now. Equal pay for equal work. @FordNation, or any other dignitary that you want to add in there, women's work must be valued the same as men. Hashtag equal pay day. Hashtag power of many. Hashtag COVID-19. Now let's get this tweet trending. And I want to thank each of you for being champions for women's rights and being here today. And I want to thank Faye and Jan and all of those who contributed to this incredible rally that we have online today. I want everyone to stay strong and stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Patty. And thanks everyone. I can see the tweets starting to buzz out there. Keep that going throughout the rally today. And our various speakers will be asking you to engage, and please join in. I'm so thrilled to welcome our next speaker, Diana Day, who is the lead matriarch of the Pacific Association of First Nations Women. As we said at the beginning, colonialism has harmed Indigenous women profoundly, and all of us have an obligation to fight to decolonize our communities and to fight to implement all of the calls for justice from the report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Welcome, Diana. We're so happy that you've joined us today.
Thank you, Nyawa. My name is Diana Day, and you can also follow me on Twitter at Diana Daydream. I'm from the Oneida Nation, Onondaga, which is outside of London, Ontario, and I'm transplanted here. And I want to acknowledge the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people who have taken care of this land for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And that's a long time. And we have to really be thankful for the Indigenous people all across Turtle Island for maintaining the land in the way that they had for all these years. I'm just thinking about my own teachings and where I come from. And I'm Haudenosaunee and transplanted here in BC. And my mother raised me to know that I am North American Indian. We were here long before the borders, and our people originate from New York State area, and we were relocated in 1840 by boat to Ontario. My people were, and then the boat continued along around Michigan and dropped off some other relatives in Wisconsin. So we have Oneida, New York, Ontario, and Wisconsin. And it's really important to remember that as Haudenosaunee people, we are a matriarchal community, and that many of our Indigenous communities are matriarchal. And it's really important to know that colonization has brought us to where we are today. And patriarchal societies have eroded many of our languages, our cultures, our traditions, but we're gaining those back. And it's becoming more acknowledged. Actually, we here in Vancouver, we're on Coast Salish territory, but we're also providing some services to Cree and Ojibwe people who are, there's a lot that are here in Vancouver in the Lower Mainland. So it's really important that we lift each other up as women, especially. We have a big struggle ahead of us and also behind us. There's many women who've helped us to get to the place where we are today. The Pacific Association of First Nations Women was formed in '81, and during that time they had a small group of women who were working in government agencies, wanted to come together to support one another because of the racism and discrimination that they were faced with. They wanted to band together and to come up with some solutions, and that was in '81. And we see that happening all across the sectors, from retail to transit to education, healthcare, justice. Oh my God. There is no justice for our people. There is no justice for our people, and I want that to be known that there's so many wrongs that our people have been faced with and have had to come against time and time again. And I applaud our people. I raise my hands to our people because we have come through so many obstacles to get where we are today. And I want to say that it's so important to support our women on the front lines. We have a lot of Indigenous women on the front lines, a lot who are working, helping our people. They're at home making masks right now. We have Misty Frederick, we have Harriet Prince, we have a lot of women all across the country who are still on the front lines and who are still doing work. So I really raise my hand to those women. So important to have support from them. So I'm thinking about also the association and about our vision and our mission and our mandate, and how our vision is that we envision a matriarchal community where all Indigenous women in BC are safe and respected, and they're connected to culture, and they have a sense of belonging. That's something that we want to see for all Indigenous women all across Canada. It should not be, we should be safe. There's so many women and also men that are targeted, murdered. There's like 7 men in Saskatchewan now, 7 people in Saskatchewan that were murdered, and they arrested someone. These are Indigenous people. So we're targeted, we're hunted even. So we need to bring in the police, the justice, the teachers, all the unions. And I implore each of the organizations that are here to look at the Indigenous people that you're serving, if you are serving Indigenous people, and to look at your own staff and your own management staff, and to make sure that you have Indigenous management staff on your team, that we don't just have frontline workers, that we need Indigenous management staff. We need Indigenous board members on your board too, if you have board. So looking at our organizations and their structures and how they're set up, because we have systemic racism systems in our society, and we have to We have to take the blinders off, and we have to look at it and address it face on, full on. And I really appreciate the words that were said earlier about all the calls to action. All those things are really important, but it's really also important to respect our people, to know that our women and our men are doing the best they can with what we have, and it's not a lot in many cases, and that's because the government has been benefiting, and all of the settlers have been benefiting from this land, from living on this land, and reaping all the rewards from it, and leaving our people, pushing our people off to the sides. So we really have to stop that, and you have to take a look within your own organizations. Take a look in your own organizations and see what the makeup is, and see what it is, how we're oppressing our women still within these organizations. That's one of the things that our society wants to do, is to have a collective impact study to look at the racism, discrimination that's happening all across the sectors, and then to come up with some champions. We need champions against racism. We need allies, and we need an army of allies to help us, because it's taken so many generations to get us to where we are. It's going to take us generations to move us out of this oppression that we're under. So I really applaud the people in Ontario who organized this. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Nyawa. I want to say thank you, Nyawa. And as they say here, Haichka Osiam for this day and for supporting women on the front lines. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Nyawa. Osiam.
Thank you so much, Diana. And thank you for bringing all of that knowledge and that wisdom to our work. And
I have a hashtag. The hashtag I'd like you to use is hashtag Indigenous Women Rise. Indigenous Women Rise. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. So, Jen, why don't you come back on for our next round of interactions and to set up our next round of speakers.
Well, I'm wondering if Diana could, if she would, pull out her drum again, because I think it's time. We've got to make some noise for those three fantastic women, Marie Clarke Walker, Patty Coates, and Diana Day. For their... All right, we'll make some noise. Noise for women's equality. This phrase, take the blinders off, is so important. That's what we're doing today, is that we're unmasking the systemic discrimination that exists for all women, and particularly for Indigenous women in this country. So we wanted to now move to three other speakers who are working on the front lines to ensure that no women are left behind. And I'll be calling on Asia Mason, Pam Fraiche, and Faye to talk about migrant workers. But let's start with Asia Mason. Asia's from the Yukon Status of Women organization, very strong advocate, highly recognized leader of the North. And Asia, welcome and thank you for agreeing to join us today. And we look forward to your words.
Thanks so much. Can everybody hear me okay? You can hear me? I'm unmuted.
We can hear you.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks everybody. I'm beaming into your screens today from the traditional territory of the Ta'an-Kwachun Council and the Kwalnandun First Nations. The colonized name for that space is Whitehorse, the capital city, Yukon Territory. And as the presenter mentioned, I'm the director of the Yukon Status of Women Council. We're a really small NGO that promotes gender equality through research, education, policy analysis, and incredible projects. I'm just going to briefly talk about what the impacts are to Northern women in particular as a result of pay inequality. So I definitely come from a Yukon background. I'm born and raised here, third generation colonizer. And I don't want to speak too much about the Northwest Territories or Nunavut because those are not the places that I come from, but a lot of the things that I'm about to say definitely apply to those spaces. So by virtue of being as far north as we are, there are some pretty huge implications, especially for women. Food security is a huge issue in the north. We ship so much of our food from down south through the highway systems and often through shipping containers that come up from the Alaska ports. And we know that as a result of COVID, that's having a huge impact on our sense of food security. Housing in the north is another major issue that women are constantly having to contend with accessibility to. There's a housing crisis across the north, and that has to do with the fact that housing code, what's the permits that are required to actually inhabit your house in the north are significantly more constraining than down south, and that's because we have to build really thick walls, and we live in these airtight spaces, so it's really expensive to build a house in the north. And we also ship the vast majority of the materials. Trees are very small up here, so we can't necessarily mill lumber as quickly as you would in other spaces. So what that means is that women are majorly affected by that, more so than men. The minimum wage in the Yukon is $12.71 an hour, and the Yukon Anti-Poverty Coalition recently published a living wage estimate, which placed that living wage in the Yukon at least to be at least $19 an hour. Another thing that is really important to consider is the climate crisis. In the north, they often cite it as the canary in the coal mine for climate change, and we also know that climate change and the climate crisis has a disproportionate impact on women. So as the climate crisis accelerates, we'll see more and more impacts to women who are doing all of the work that ends up getting impacted by environmental degradation and climate change in particular. I just want to shift focus quickly here to talk about COVID, because that's been something that's clearly on everybody's minds. The internet and access to the internet in the north is notoriously sketchy, and there is not enough infrastructure, and the infrastructure that does exist makes it monopolizable, we'll say. There's only one internet company that basically controls the entire infrastructure in the north for the internet. As a result of that, it's very, very expensive because they can determine what the prices are. As COVID evolves and the more we start to realize that this is going to be going on for a while, we're, especially up here, we're starting to recognize the importance of access to the internet. The internet is going to be the forum through which people are going to be able to access services, including things like the emergency response benefit and ordering food, ordering supplies. All of these things are mediated through the internet. If women can't afford to pay for the internet, they're going to be facing a huge barrier in terms of access to basic services, and in some cases safety. The north experiences significantly higher rates of domestic and sexualized violence comparatively to southern Canada, and we know that having a safety plan is going to be really important, but often the only way that women are going to be able to reach out is through the internet or through a telephone. Another thing that is fairly alarming is that mining in the Yukon, at least, has not stopped and not slowed down as a result of COVID. Every other sector has responded accordingly, has implemented social distancing, yet the price of gold, being what it is, has increased huge in the last 2 weeks alone, and mining in the Yukon is often gold mining. So the mining industry is going strong, and we all know that there's huge correlations between sexualized violence and decreased safety for women in particular as a function of mining and the mining industry. So taken together, women in the north are significantly impacted not only by COVID and the COVID crisis, but by pay inequality and the fact that things like daycare and the access to daycare, housing, food, these basic necessities of life, women are having to work until at least April in order to make the same amount of money as their male counterparts. And At any rate, one of the things that we wanted to emphasize in the Yukon is that we don't want Northern women to be forgotten. We recognize that at least 25% of the population in the Yukon are Indigenous and First Nation, and that means that those women who are Indigenous and First Nation are experiencing even more discrimination and even more impacts as a result of this. So I invite you all to post a simple hashtag, and that is, please do not forget Northern women. Thank you so much.
Asia, thank you very much. And by your participation today, it means Northern women won't be forgotten. We can call out for basic necessities of life, for food security and affordable food. We can call out for access to something like the internet, which of course is a basic necessity for those living in the North. We won't forget Northern women. So what I'd like to do now is turn and ask Pam Fraiche, lead organizer at 15 in Fairness here in Ontario, to talk a bit about the demands that have been coming forward from 15 in Fairness. Hi, Pam, welcome, and we look forward to your comments.
Thank you very much for having me and for all the incredible contributions so far and for organizing this. We want to talk about the incredible crisis that we're in right now, as many of you have touched on. We know with the emergency response benefit that has been made available, it's certainly a positive step forward insofar as it recognizes that $500 per week is a minimum amount of money that workers need to have to survive. It now helps us pose the question for all the other supports, for all the other people who are surviving without work, whether it's on social assistance, on disability supports, on old age security, and so forth. Our campaign right now is calling for at least $500 in supports for everyone, regardless of whether or not you're currently on EI or whether or not you're undocumented and have a social insurance number. These are two big pitfalls in terms of the emergency benefit that has been announced. Right now, if refugees, undocumented workers, students may not yet have a social insurance number, and at present there's no clear pathway for those to get the income support they need, and we know the situation is absolutely desperate. So please call the federal cabinet. We have a link to an online tool that will help you to do that. And we're asking for $500 for everyone. And our hashtag is leave no one behind. Our second very important demand is a comprehensive set of supports that all workers need. People have talked about paid sick days and much better access to employment insurance. At present, it's shocking to me how many workers and how many women are on the front lines in precarious employment who don't actually have paid sick days. And particularly in the healthcare sector, my mind was literally blown to learn that there are long-term care workers, that there are nurses, there are people in group homes, there are people who are lab technicians who don't have a minimum number of paid sick days. Our campaign is calling for at least 21 days in the midst of a pandemic. That's 7 days permanently for all workers at a minimum on a go-forward basis, but an automatic additional 14 days whenever there's an outbreak or a pandemic. And finally, a much greater and improved and enhanced system of employment insurance. Women are 70% of women who are unemployed access EI on a good day, never mind in circumstances like those we're facing now. So we want to make sure that on a go-forward basis, we have a much enhanced employment insurance program. I also want to talk about the importance of making sure that everyone has access to these supports. And again, I want to end by saying, we've now got acknowledgement from the government that everyone needs at least $500 a week in order to survive. If we can win the top-ups to employment insurance, if we can win top-ups for social assistance, disability supports, old age securities, we can really begin to transform how we protect the most vulnerable. But for heaven's sakes, across this country, if we don't deliver paid emergency leave days for all workers in the midst of a pandemic, then shame on us, because we know paid emergency leaves are vital, not merely for containing outbreaks like the common flu, the common cold, and so forth. Not only is it important for us to be able to follow the advice of health providers to stay home when we're sick, and that saves us on healthcare costs and keeps people protected under normal circumstances, we really need to make sure this is in place. When in Ontario, when we had Doug Ford on one day say, go out and have the best March break of your life, and then 24 hours later announce that every school in the province is going to close, that had the effect of throwing women out of work across the school system and imposing an incredible burden on women who have to look after their kids. So we need at least 3 weeks of paid emergency leave to make sure that we have an economic stabilizer and that women who shoulder the burden of carrying responsibilities have the protections they need. And we need to make sure that the income supports are there so people don't have to work in unsafe conditions without paid sick days and so forth. And finally, I'll close by saying we need to make all these improvements permanent on a go-forward basis. As sisters have said earlier in the call, the wages are too low. The minimum wage in Saskatchewan is $11.32 an hour. This is completely unacceptable. This is where most women and workers of color find themselves in low-wage, part-time, precarious employment. Let's recommit ourselves to justice and fairness for all of us, and let's leave no one behind. Thank you very much, and I urge you to check out the links in the chat section to take action today. Thank you.
Pam, thank you very much. Without a doubt, we've got, we have an opportunity here. We've got a real opportunity to push this government to recognize that across this country, we need paid emergency leave without a question, and that we require income security supports at a minimum of $500 a week. The government's done it now, and there's no reason why they would stop in the future. So Pam, thank you very much. Now, and I encourage everybody to go to the 15 of Fairness website. They have very comprehensive resources. I've done terrific analysis on the gaps that exist in the EI system, the gaps that are existing with the emergency relief plans, and have a number of very important demands outlined on their website. So please go. And as Pam reminds everybody, let the Prime Minister know. Just let the Prime Minister know, let your members of Parliament know, let your MPPs know and the premiers know, you can do this, you can do better. Leave nobody behind. Now, in the consideration of leaving no one behind, we want to turn back to Faraday, who's part of the Migrant Workers Network. And Faye, you have a few words on the particular circumstances of faced with migrant workers today.
Thanks very much, Jen. And I'm just holding up to the camera some of the pins from the Migrant Workers Network, the care workers who've been fighting for landed status since the mid-'80s. And for all the migrant workers who are here across Canada, there are over 1.2 million people who are migrant workers in Canada who are working on the various kinds of work permits in this country, and they're absolutely essential to keeping our economy going. We have the first flights of farm workers who are coming into Canada just over the past couple of weeks to begin the growing season, and the farm workers are keeping the food on our table as we manage through this crisis. It's important to note that with all those migrant workers in all the different ways that they're contributing to the economy, they include the low-wage migrant workers who are the farm workers, the live-in care workers, folks working in retail, folks working in manufacturing, folks working in hospitality and through all the different industries. But they also include refugees who are waiting for status. They include the hundreds of thousands of international students who have not only had their educational programs constrained, but have lost their work on campus and are at threat of losing their residence on campus as terms come to a close. There are so many undocumented workers who keep so many of our industries working who are also at significant risk now. Pandemics know no borders, and our solidarity must know no borders as well. We're calling on all individuals and organizations to support migrant workers in this time. You've seen very immediately with the rise of COVID, the way that racism was once again weaponized to target people who are perceived, are blamed as being the cause of the virus. There's been particularly aggressive, dangerous, hostile racism directed against Asian people in Canada, whether they have status or not. But migrant workers in particular are being targeted by racism. And so one of the calls of the Migrant Rights Network right across the country is to unite against racism, to call it out, to use the hashtag Unite Against Racism, and as part of our fight to make sure that no one is left behind. The calls that migrant workers are also fighting for are healthcare for all. For many migrant workers, their access to healthcare is dependent on their continuing work with an employer, where their jobs have been curtailed because of lack of work, where they're losing their jobs because of COVID-19. They're also at risk of losing access to healthcare services. And so access to healthcare is a critical demand for all. Migrant workers work in so many of the industries where you see routine violations of worker rights at the best of times. They often work without protections. And again, now that those workers are on the front line dealing with the necessary jobs that keep us fed and safe and healthy, having access to protections now is critical, but that protection should be there always. As Pam said, workers need these protections not just in moments of crisis, but these are fundamental rights: the access to paid sick days, the access to health and safety protections, the access to emergency leave, the access to work without fear. And finally, we have to ensure that migrant workers are not subject to detentions and deportations at this time. If workers are at risk in Canada, they would be equally at risk in their home countries. There is no, the call to end deportations is absolutely critical. And I want to make one final comment about care workers who are facing particular danger at this time. Many care workers are working in homes with their employers, and during this period of lockdown in COVID, that means that many, many care workers are locked in 24/7 with their employers in their employers' houses. Their employers are afraid to let them out, and so those workers are fully captive, never off duty, 24/7, and fully isolated. It's absolutely critical that we provide support and protection for migrant workers wherever they are in our economy, and to make sure that we leave no one behind. I'll urge all of you to go to the Migrant Rights Network website. It's migrantrights.ca. And there is a petition there that sets out the migrant worker demands for justice, including that access to health care for all, the protections at work, the end to deportations, and our unity against racism. So again, use the hashtags Unite Against Racism, Leave No One Behind. Thanks for your solidarity.
Faye, thank you very much. And in terms of building that solidarity, what we really wanted to do now was shift back to the folks who are attending this rally. So we're going to do something a little different. You may have noticed I like to bang my pots, but we know there's currently well over a couple of hundred folks attending the rally. And what we'd like to be able to do is take a picture and show how many of us are in red. Now, what Karen, through her magic, is going to do is ask everybody to turn on make sure your webcams are on. Karen will be turning those on as well. And we're allowed a maximum of 6 pictures on the screen at one time. And the idea will be to take selfies. There we've got Carolyn Ferns, we've got Pam back on, Patty's on, Faye and myself. So time for some selfies. And what's going to happen is you can take a screenshot of, here, I'll show you what I'm going to try and do. And people who know me well will be laughing at this moment and saying, oh, this is a dangerous thought. Jan's actually going to try and take a screenshot. But there we go. And fantastic. Take a screenshot, tweet it out, send it out at and about, and call for action. Call for leave no one behind. Now, Karen's going to scroll through a few more of the webcam shots. There's Shawnee from the OFL. There we've got Diana's back. I'll take another shot. There we go. Oh, Karen, you can take me down. I don't need to be a part of them. Keep scrolling through. Fantastic. If you really want to be on, send us a wave. You can have, you'll see a little hand as one of the items on. We've got Deborah Angelis. Who else have we got? There's Andrea Sobko.
And you can also just take a selfie of yourself where you are and tweet it out with the hashtag Equal Pay Day and say you're at the Equal Pay Day rally.
There's Karen and Joanne. Fantastic. Okay, so Faye, I think we'll turn it over to you. What we wanted to do now was shift into talking with some number of women who are actually on the front lines of this COVID-19 pandemic, who are there caring for the community and bringing the community together. So Faye, back over to you.
So we have another lineup of speakers who are coming to us. We'll have Andrea Sobko, who's with the Ontario Nurses Association, speaking for the nurses who are on the front lines of so many of the battles that folks are facing. We'll hear as well as in this section from Pam Parks from QP Local 6364, Deb Angelis from the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, Carolyn Ferns from the Coalition for Better Childcare, and Joanne Perron from the New Brunswick Pay Equity Coalition. But let's start off first with Andrea. Over to you.
Great, thanks. Well, thank you so much to the Equal Pay Coalition for inviting ONA to be here today to talk about pay equity, which is one of the most important issues facing our ONA members as well as all women workers. So ONA is the largest nurses union in Canada. We represent more than 68,000 registered nurses and other healthcare professionals, including social workers, physiotherapists, and respiratory therapists across Ontario. As many of you know, our members are on the front line of the COVID-19 pandemic. They are primary caregivers in hospitals, long-term care facilities, public health units, clinics, and in the community. Faye mentioned before that nursing is an overwhelmingly female-dominated profession, with over 90% of the workforce being women. So that means that women are on the front lines. They are bearing the brunt of this crisis. So today I want to highlight 3 of the key impacts that our members have seen unfold over the last few weeks. One of the most paramount issues for ONA has been ensuring that our nurses on the front lines have access to adequate personal protective equipment to ensure their health and safety at work. Some of the main concerns that we've been hearing over the last few weeks revolve around the denial of N95 respirator masks to nurses for anything except aerosol generating medical procedures, as well as masks being held under lock and key by the employer, rationing of masks, with some nurses being provided only 1 or 2 masks per day, or being told to carry them home in a baggie and reuse them, the use of expired masks, as well as failure to provide appropriate PPE for pregnant or immunocompromised nurses. So ONA has been filing grievances and made a number of complaints to the Ministry of Labor related to these issues, as well as others. That was by no means an exhaustive list. And some of those issues have escalated to work refusals. So a second issue that we've been dealing with has been around 3 emergency orders that have been issued since March 21st, which has given hospitals, long-term care facilities, as well as boards of health within health units the ability to unilaterally override certain sections of ONA's collective agreements. So basically, that gives healthcare providers the authorization to deploy nurses to different work sites, including COVID-19 assessment centers. They can change work assignments for nurses, cancel vacations and other types of leave, as well as use temporary or agency staff and contractors, or even volunteers to perform bargaining unit work, as well as retrain nurses for the purposes of redeployment. Those orders were actually issued without consultation with the union, and the redeployment plans do not need to comply with the provisions of the existing collective agreements. So that has obviously been a huge issue for our members and for the union. And so the third thing is that I wanted to mention is that all of this has been happening within the context of the Ford government already having passed a few months ago wage restraint legislation, which had capped wages for certain public sector workers, including nurses, at 1%. And that wage cap did not actually cover many of the male-dominated public sector workers, including police officers and firefighters. So ONA has actually, along with many other unions, already brought a charter challenge against that legislation. And ONA is actually the only union that is bringing it on the grounds of gender discrimination. So I wanted to share with you a quote actually from one of our members with regard to that. And she said that she hoped that the COVID-19 pandemic would demonstrate to the Ford government the dedication and value of nurses, and that we are worth far more than 1%. But it's pretty sad that it has to take this to demonstrate that. So I think just a few of those things all happening within the course of a few weeks shows that for nurses, pay equity is amongst the most fundamental of our human rights issues that we're dealing with. They literally cannot afford to wait for it. Nurses are on the front lines. They are risking their own health and safety to ensure that patients receive the best possible care. And as women, many of them are also facing the double burden of being caregivers at home as well. Nursing work is care work. It is something that ONA has been fighting to bring to light for more than 30 years through all of the pay equity advocacy work that we've been doing. And we're actually currently in the midst of a 13-year long fight for pay equity for nurses in the private nursing home sector. So I think one thing that we all can agree on and has brought up is that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought to light what many of us have seen for decades, which is that nursing is a highly skilled profession, but is also often undervalued and undercompensated. And the pandemic has shown us that the current system, which is structured around neoliberal capitalism, has often failed to meet people's basic needs and has really perpetuated income inequalities and the devaluing of labor. So going forward, we cannot allow government to return to those regressive austerity measures and continue with cuts to public health that were happening and reductions to hospital funding and the persistent undervaluing of nursing work. And so to do, the closing of the gender pay gap really requires all of our collective advocacy in the movement towards women's economic justice, and the time for action for that really is now, and there's an urgent need for it. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to share what we've been seeing on the front lines at ONA, and to express solidarity with everyone, and to invite you all to follow ONA on Twitter at Ontario Nurses, as well as on Facebook. And we actually just got a new Instagram page this week, and we're at ontario.nurses on there. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Andrea, and strong wishes of solidarity, strong messages of solidarity from everyone here on the rally and everyone from the Equal Pay Coalition. We want to hear next from Pam Parks, who is representing workers at QP Local 6364. And we'll put up Pam's picture. Pam doesn't have a webcam, but you can see her picture here, and I'll hand the mic over to you.
Pam, you'll have to unmute your mic so that we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can, yep, thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Pam Parks. I'm a registered practical nurse. I'm also the president of QP Local 6364, the Hospital Workers of Durham. Unlike other healthcare workers, QP does represent registered practical nurses, clerical, cleaners, dietary, stores, sterilized process endo, CSR, maintenance, and the list goes on. We are all frontline workers. The ONA colleague mentioned the emergency legislation that the Ontario government handed down a few weeks ago. This further undervalued the work of frontline workers. Since the COVID-19, we have been advocating for protective personal equipment, including the fit-tested N95 mask for all frontline workers. Even after COVID-19 was declared a pandemic, the employer refused to give staff working with COVID-19 probable or confirmed COVID-19 patients, the staff that are working in these areas, they're fit-tested N95 masks. They told them that only this past week, all staff are allowed a surgical mask, and they are still pushed back by some of their managers that said, unless you are within 6 feet of a COVID-19 patient, you must not wear a mask. The employer told staff, if you are doing routine care like bathing, ambulation in rooms, medication, just use a regular surgical mask with a shield. You will only get a fit-tested N95 only if you are performing aerosol treatment like oxygen, intubations, suctioning, inhalation therapy. Ontario Health Coalition provided a province-wide stat, very thorough, of the devastating exposure and life loss by COVID-19. And I'm imploring you, when you get a chance, to check out their website, thanks to Natalie Mayer. Most of these exposures are preventable if the employer took a proactive approach by providing the proper PPEs. The employer even went as far as telling staff that other superbugs such as MRSA, C. diff, when caring for these patients with the infection, not to wear any PPEs. Just remember to wash your hands, they're told. This is totally unacceptable. Does the staff also stand at the sink at the workplace and launder their uniforms? The employer needs to get with reality and realize that without proper PPEs, infections will be on staff clothing, and that is one way of spreading the infections. Staff morale are low, they are scared, and their anxiety is at all-time high. With the government announcing there are plenty of PPEs, and the employer is saying they are not enough, and the unions are telling them to request their PPE, some of these staff are at a loss and don't know who to actually listen to at times. What we are asking for, we would like the provincial government to provide us with N95 masks and other protective equipment when we are dealing with confirmed, presumed, and suspected COVID-19 patients. On Tuesday, the Ontario government revised safety protocol further so that they only apply to registered nurses. Although many healthcare staff, including doctors, cleaners, registered practical nurses, PSWs, screeners, and many others will be dealing with COVID-19 patients, we're asking the government to immediately extend the safety protocol to all staff. The government must immediately order the private sector to ramp up production of N95s and procedural masks, reusable masks, gowns, gloves, face shields, ventilators, and testing kits. We don't have enough equipment. We want the province to tighten its safety protocol to take airborne precautions for all healthcare workers in hospitals, long-term care, home care, community health, and on ambulances who come within 6 feet of a suspected or confirmed cases of COVID-19. This means that these staff should be provided with an N95 mask, eye protection, and other appropriate equipment. A number of respected organizations, including the Journal of American Medical Association, the Lancet, the Center for Disease Control, the state of California, and until 3 weeks ago, the Ontario government, among many others, recommend treating the virus as airborne. The Ontario government watered down its safety protocol because of its supply shortage. The 1 million expired N95 masks should be distributed immediately across the healthcare sector. The manufacturers say that only the elastic actually expired and that these masks are usable. Why? A healthcare worker who is inadequately protected and become infected can be asymptomatic for days and infect many patients or residents and co-workers. Many hospital patients and long-term care residents can't withstand COVID-19. We must keep them safe. Already, Ontario healthcare workers have an infection rate that is 4 times that of Ontario population. Italian and Spanish healthcare workers have an infection rate of 12%, and New York City paramedics have an infection rate of 20%. All follow precautions like Ontario's. Chinese healthcare workers who followed airborne precaution have an infection rate of just 3%. Healthcare workers' life matter. They come into work to help the sick. Please provide them with their PPEs so they can be healthy and still be around, alive after COVID-19. If you have a website, I'm just asking. I don't do Twitter, but if you go on Facebook and you actually, the picture that you see, if you want to tweet it out, however you do it, Facebook it, because I'm telling you, your frontline workers that are there, everyone, they go to work, all they're asking for, which is not much. I can't stress it enough. It's not enough to ask to have your proper gear so that you can be protected and look after the people who come in the hospital that they so love to look after. And if you can tweet that all out, we're begging, we're pleading, we're asking, please support your frontline workers, and take care, be safe, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pam, for putting the spotlight on all the women who are working on the front lines, and how important it is for all of us to be supporting their fight and getting the word out to keep our workers safe. We'll hear next from Deb Angelis, who is the Regional Director and National Strategic Campaigns Coordinator for the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. Deb is also a longtime supporter of the Equal Pay Coalition. Welcome, Deb. We need to get your mic on.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and what an important time to have this conversation about the gendered impact of COVID-19. So yes, I'm Deborah DeAngelis with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. UFCW Canada represents 250,000 union members across Canada who are working in food retail, food processing, transportation, healthcare, logistics, warehousing, agricultural, hospitality, manufacturing, security, and other professional sectors. And 54% of our membership are women. So in the wake of COVID-19, UFCW Canada heard from our members about their health and safety concerns and started advocating both locally and nationally on behalf of the membership. And thanks to that hard work, Loblaw's members were the first frontline workers to gain $2 an hour wage increase across the country, physical distancing measures, and plexiglass dividers at checkouts and service counters. And these gains produced more discussions with other unionized frontline employers such as Metro, Food Basics, Sobeys, Safeways, and IGA stores across the country. The momentum continued because following these negotiations with the supermarkets, members who produce food at Cargill, Oli Mill, Maple Leaf Foods, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, and others also achieved additional pay premiums and safety measures in recognition of their hard work throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm an optimist. So I hope that the post-COVID-19 world will, number one, focus on stability, quality, and long-term gain, and not on explosive growth in a winner-takes-all race to the bottom. One. Number two, that underpaid jobs that previously were not given much value will be taken a lot more seriously. We no longer have to imagine it because we're living it. Being able to stay at home and venture out only when you need to, without the hard work of supermarket employees, delivery drivers, cooks, warehouse workers, truck drivers, and many other frontline service workers who keep our world running, is impossible. But there's lots of work to do to hang on to this new normal. So number one, let's ensure that women who do not have a union in the workplace to advocate on behalf of their health and safety can join a union, and stiffer penalties to employers who threaten, coerce, and terminate during union drives. Number two, keep up the pressure on governments and employers to ensure that the gains that have been made are not taken away. Keep up the pressure to ensure that the conversation around the value, and particularly the value for work done by women, does not go away. Let's make sure that we move everyone up and not race to the bottom. And here's my last ask. Show appreciation to the frontline workers when you see them. Take the time to thank them for the work that they are doing, because thanks to these workers who go to work despite the risks and despite the long lockdowns, while almost everyone is home to slow the spread, we are going to get out of this pandemic. So thank you so much to our frontline workers. Hashtag thank the frontline.
That's fantastic. Thanks very much, Deb.
Thanks,
And
Deb.
we will, as we go out, we will take that seriously and thank all those frontline workers who we encounter as we wander through this new world. I want to invite up next Carolyn Fern from the Coalition for Better Childcare. And one thing that has been so clear over the last few weeks is how critical childcare is to keeping our economy moving. Without childcare, our economy grinds to a halt. So Carolyn, let's bring you onto the screen.
Hi, can you folks hear me?
We can hear you, Carolyn. Carolyn doesn't have a webcam, unfortunately, so
I was having some technical difficulties, so I've had to log off and log back on my phone, and yeah, just some connection problems. So, but glad you can all hear me. So, I just want to start by asking the question that, you know, given the situation we're all in now, can we all now agree that early childhood educators' work is vital, skilled, professional, and that they deserve decent work and pay? The COVID-19 pandemic has shone a light onto how crucial childcare is, and it's also thrown the childcare crisis into sharp relief. Parents who are trying to work at home while trying to care for young children, and parents who are still expected at work on the front line, but whose childcare is now closed, know this firsthand. And governments have suddenly realized that free 24/7 childcare is necessary for essential service workers. But early childhood educators and childcare workers are still very much an afterthought in all of this, whether they are working in emergency childcare centers themselves, or if they're facing layoffs while their childcare centers are closed. They're very much an afterthought on the part of government. So our number one ask right now is for the federal and provincial governments to provide emergency stabilization funding to the childcare sector. Centers that have been temporarily closed because of the pandemic need stabilization funding desperately so that they can continue to pay staff while closed, not charge parents fees, and not go bankrupt themselves. Without emergency funding, we are going to see massive layoffs of early childhood educators, which have already started in some places. We're going to see parents continue to be charged fees for a service they aren't receiving. And we're going to see centers that continue to pay staff while not charging fees put themselves at financial risk of permanent closure. So in response to this demand that we've put forward in an emergency plan for childcare, we've had some people, including our own Minister of Education, ask, well, how is childcare any different from any other business? Now, the difference is that we are going to need childcare centers ready to open the moment that we're ready to bring the economy out of hibernation. There is no economic recovery without childcare. But if a large number of childcare centers have closed, if early childhood educators have left the sector for good, we'll be in an even deeper childcare crisis than we are before all of this started. Now, that's the reason we've been giving to government a solid economic argument. But I would suggest there's also a deeper human argument as well. And that's that what we're experiencing today, living through this pandemic, is going to be traumatic for many young children. Children thrive in stable, predictable routines where they can explore their environment and take healthy risks. But thousands, hundreds of thousands of children across the country have just had those routines upended. And everything they might want to do, from going to the playground to hugging their grandma, is suddenly an unhealthy risk. So when we're moving into a post-pandemic economic recovery, we're going to need childcare. But we're going to need it to be so much more than just 4 walls and some freshly disinfected toys. It's going to be the skilled work of educators with their knowledge of child well-being, their understanding of how children handle trauma, who are going to help guide and educate an entire generation of children to believe in a safe future and a bright future again. So I'm going to go back to my original question. Can we all now agree that early childhood educators' work is vital, skilled, professional, and that they deserve decent work and pay? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. It's that perspective that you've brought about the incredible skill that childcare workers bring to their jobs and the necessity of that skilled work in helping a new generation believe in safety, believe in solidarity is absolutely critical. It's without childcare, as you say, there is no recovery after COVID. Without childcare, there is no resurgence in the economy. And so I want to now welcome our final speaker of our lineup, who is Joanne Perron, the Executive Director of the New Brunswick Pay Equity Coalition. Joanne has been a long-time ally nationally in the fight for equal pay. Joanne, bienvenue.
Oh, Joanne, I think you're muted. Can you try to unmute? Okay. Oh, yeah. Yes, we can hear you now.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So, well, thank you very much for having me. I want to talk about the caregiving sector particularly. It really goes well with the childcare sector. It's really about all the women and men who are working with our families, with the children, the seniors, and also the people with disabilities and challenges. Those are very much female-dominated jobs. They're very impacted by the pandemic. They cannot stay at home. They have to go to work. They cannot even practice social distance with the people they care for. And they have the added stress of keeping them safe on top of their usual responsibilities. So really, I find that the crisis has really showed the importance of that work, and they've been told that they were essential workers, but they're far from being paid as essential workers and far from being paid as the skilled labor that they are. And just to give, to illustrate that, I just want to highlight how the wages here for workers in transition houses, community residences, home support work, and also senior citizens' homes are earning between $14 and $16 an hour. And that's quite far from what cable technicians are making, which is around $25 an hour. We're not saying that the cable technicians are being paid too much, but really it's quite clear that the caregiving workers are truly underpaid. So really, I find it is time for us to ensure public investments in the wages of all caregiving workers, and also to ensure they have pay equity, equal pay for work of equal value. So they really care for us, they care for our families, and it's time for us to care for them as well. That's my message today. So I encourage you to talk about equal pay for all caregiving workers.
Thank you so much, Joanne.
Thank you.
And so thank you for all of you, the hundreds of you who have stayed with us throughout this rally. Thank you for your solidarity. Shauna Harris, one of our social media queens of the day, has just pointed out that Equal Pay Day and Close the Gap are trending on Twitter. So thank you for all of you for getting your messages out. And we're going to ask you to do some more rounds of interactions before we wrap up. So Jen, let me hand it over to you.
Sure. So there's two quick things. First off, you know, I think what we need to do is have a huge round of noise for all of today's speakers. People have taken time out of a busy Saturday, spending time, you know, taking time away from spending time with their families for us to come together to talk about really very important demands and analysis of what's happening with COVID-19 and the impact on women. So tell you what, folks, pull out your pots, pull out your noisemakers.
And Karen, open the mic so we can all hear each other.
Adjust your headsets. All right.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a wonderful way to break out of some isolation, and I'm glad that we've been able to come together. Hi, I'm so glad that we've been able to come together across this great distance to bring together more of us than we've ever been able to before on Equal Pay Day.
And Faye, let me add, if I could, one thing. In terms of the demands, there were so many key points people were making. Take blinders off, stop the race to the bottom, respect our First Nations, leave no one behind, and for goodness sakes, we're done waiting. You know, it's time to value women's work. And you know, Faye, one of the key threads that really wove its way through everyone's comments and analysis today was the need for security. How many times did we hear the term security? We heard about food security. We heard about access to a secure internet if you live in the north, which of course for us in the south may not be at the top of our, as we're sitting here in a virtual rally, may not be something that those of us in the south think very much about. So security in terms of communications and food security. But really fundamentally, you know, security in terms of health and safety in the workplace, making sure that our frontline workers have access to personal protective equipment and access to N95 masks, a huge significant demand. But ultimately, Faye, it seems to me that what we were hearing was a real demand for income security for everyone. That if we're going to value women's work, we need income security.
And there's an absolute demand that we not go back to the old normal. We started off our rally today pointing out how women began this crisis in a position of insecurity, how precarious workers, how migrant workers, how women right across the country are already vulnerable. And how any of the advances that have been made to protect workers, to protect women workers, to protect low-wage workers, those need to not only become the floor as we move forward, but we need to change our thinking so that we build something that puts people first, that puts people's security before profits, and that builds a world that is much more united and much more equal. I want to point out for everybody who is here that in the section on the webinar that says handouts, I have uploaded a couple of shareables. I'm just going to quickly let you see my screen so you can see what they look like. One of our shareables is the show us the pay gap, show us the money, close the gender pay gap on Equal Pay Day. Please feel free to download that and to tweet that out, to post it on Facebook and Instagram with the messages that resonate for your organizations and communities that you're working with. Use the hashtag Equal Pay Day and the hashtag Close the Gap and the other hashtags that Jan just mentioned. As well, I have put up another shareable, which is the picture that you see on the left, which is make every day Equal Pay Day. We mark Equal Pay Day once a year in April. We mark Working for Free Day in September, but what we're working for is that every day will be Equal Pay Day for all women all year long. and we are stronger together, and we welcome you to join the fight. We have our contacts that are up there. Please feel free to take a screenshot so that you know how to reach us on our website, by email, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
And Faye, why don't I thank everybody who's been a part of making this work. So we've a really big thank you to Chandra Lee Paul from the Ontario Federation of Labor, who helped get this whole thing started, to Karen Campbell from the Canadian Women's Foundation, who has organized our technical work. A major shout out to Shauna Harris and Anna Mala for their work this week over social media and helping to amplify many messages. We've got to thank all of the speakers today who gave a lot of thoughtful comments on what it takes to end a human rights crisis and to value women's work. And so we can't thank you enough. Faye?
And we thank all of you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in the fight. We work at this, and we help amplify the voices of other social justice movements all year long. So one more round of noise. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
What do we want? Women's equality. When do we want it? Now.
We want a webcam.
Woo! That's a good point, Deborah. So,
Or what? This is people from the coalition. What are you doing? Is it all?
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Goodbye, and we'll see you next year.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Solidarity.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Excellent.
You rock it across the country, Canada. Show us the money.
Go Canadian women.